They called her Apache Baby a demon. The alone rancher wrapped them both in his coat and faced the crowd. Introduction. Welcome, friends, to another gripping tale from the untamed frontier. Before we ride into this story of courage, prejudice, and unexpected bonds in the Old West, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of story lovers. Drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from. Are you enjoying this from Brazil, New York, or perhaps somewhere as wild and beautiful as the frontier in our story? Your support helps these tales reach more ears, and I'd love to know who's gathered around this virtual campfire today. Now, settle in as we journey to a time when the West was still wild, prejudice ran deep, and one man's courage would challenge an entire town. Chapter 1. The Stranger's Arrival. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon like a warning, growing larger as the lone rider approached the outskirts of Coyote Springs. Jacob Harmon sat on his porch, whiskey in hand, watching the approaching figure with the practiced wariness of a man who'd survived 20 years in these unforgiving lands. The small mining town of Coyote Springs, nestled in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada mountains, had seen its share of strangers since silver was discovered 2 years prior. Most came with dreams of riches, others came running from something. Jacob had long stopped wondering which category new arrivals fell into. Another fool chasing silver, he muttered to his dog, an aging cattle hound named Buck, who barely lifted his head in acknowledgement. But as the rider drew closer, Jacob straightened. It wasn't a man, but a woman, an Apache woman by the look of her, with a small bundle secured to her chest. Her horse stumbled, clearly exhausted, and the woman swayed dangerously in the saddle. Jacob set his glass down, rising to his feet just as the horse collapsed 100 yards from his property line. The woman tumbled forward, curling protectively around her bundle even as she hit the ground. "Damn it all," Jacob muttered, grabbing his canteen and jogging toward the fallen rider. Buck followed reluctantly, sensing his master's concern. The woman was young, perhaps 20, with blood caked along her temple and dirt covering her traditional dress. Her eyes, dark as midnight, flashed with fear and defiance as Jacob approached. She clutched the bundle tighter. A baby, Jacob realized with surprise. A mixed-blood infant with copper skin and wisps of honey-colored hair. "I mean no harm," Jacob said slowly, offering the canteen. "Your horse is done for, and you need water." She didn't move, her eyes darting between Jacob and the town beyond, weighing invisible options. "I have a wagon," Jacob continued. "I can take you to town or—" "No town," she interrupted, her English heavily accented but clear. "They will kill us," Jacob frowned, looking toward Coyote Springs with its church steeple and bustling main street. The town had its share of prejudice. What frontier settlement didn't? But murder seemed extreme. The baby whimpered, and the woman's expression softened momentarily as she adjusted the blanket. When she looked back at Jacob, there was steel in her gaze. "Water," she conceded, reaching for the canteen with one hand while keeping the other firmly around her child. "You're hurt," Jacob observed as she drank deeply. "Apache scouts," she replied bitterly. "They hunt me for my husband's people. White men hunt me for my people." She looked down at the child. "Both hunt her for being both." Jacob understood then, a child of two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The woman had fled her tribe for loving a white man, only to find no sanctuary among the settlers either. "Name's Jacob Harmon," he said finally. "My ranch is just yonder. You and the little one can rest there while I tend to your wound." Suspicion clouded her features. "Why help?" Jacob's weathered face revealed nothing as memories of his own past flashed before him. A Cheyenne woman's smile, a child's laughter silenced too soon, a grave dug by his own hands 20 years ago. "Because I know what it means to lose everything," he answered simply, "and that child deserves a fighting chance." After a long moment, she nodded. "I am Nita. My daughter is a pony." "Little butterfly," Jacob translated, surprising her. "Now, my late wife was Cheyenne," he explained. As Jacob helped Nita to her feet, shots rang out from the direction of town. A group of riders was approaching, led by Sheriff Dawson, a man whose hatred of Indians was matched only by his ambition to keep Coyote Springs civilized for the investors flooding in. "Seems your reputation precedes you," Jacob said grimly. "Can you walk?" Nita nodded, determination overriding pain. Then we'd best hurry," Jacob replied, leading her toward his property as the riders drew closer. "Seems we've got company coming, and they don't look like they're bringing welcome baskets." Buck barked a warning as Jacob ushered Nita toward his modest ranch house, the sound of approaching hoofbeats growing louder with each passing second. Chapter 2. Whispers and Threats. By nightfall, news of the Apache woman and her half-breed child had spread through Coyote Springs like wildfire. Jacob's ranch, typically ignored by townsfolk, had become the center of unwanted attention. Sheriff Dawson had been surprisingly restrained during their confrontation, limited to threats rather than action, a fact Jacob attributed to his own reputation as a marksman and the Winchester rifle he'd kept casually aimed in the sheriff's direction throughout their conversation. "She killed 2 men in the hills," Dawson had claimed, sitting stiffly on his horse. "Stole their valuables." "Funny," Jacob had replied. "She says she's running from Apache scouts and prejudiced white men. No mention of being a murderer and thief." "Indians lie, Harmon. You of all people should know that." Jacob had felt his trigger finger itch at the thinly veiled reference to his past. Strange. In my experience, men with badges looking to impress mining companies lie a whole lot more. Dawson had left with a warning. "The town meeting's tomorrow. We'll decide what to do about your guests then. Till then, they're your problem, but they can't stay, Harmon, not in Coyote Springs." Now, as Jacob stoked the fire in his modest cabin, Nita sat in a rocking chair nursing her daughter. Her wound had been cleaned and bandaged, her story shared in halting English over a simple meal of beans and cornbread. She had indeed been the wife of a white prospector named Thomas Whelan, who treated with her tribe fairly and fallen in love with her against all conventions. They'd lived in the hills, away from both worlds that would condemn them, until Apache scouts, angry at what they saw as her betrayal, had attacked 3 days ago. Thomas had died defending his family, giving Nita time to escape with a pony. "The men sheriff speak of, they attacked me on the trail," Nita explained. "I defend my child. Is this murder to your people?" "To some," Jacob admitted, pouring coffee. "To others, it's survival. The truth doesn't much matter to men like Dawson. They see what they want to see." "You see different," Nita observed, studying him. "Why?" Jacob's gaze drifted to a small trunk in the corner, the only personal item in his Spartan home. "I had a wife once, Sarah, Cheyenne woman, and a daughter." "They are gone," Nita said. It wasn't a question. Jacob nodded, the memories flooding back. 15 years ago, cholera took them both while I was away driving cattle. By the time I returned, he trailed off, the pain still raw despite the passage of time. "I'm sorry," Nita said simply. "Sarah's people saw our marriage as a betrayal too," Jacob continued after a moment, "and most white folks saw her as less than human. We lived apart, like you and Thomas. It was a hard life, but a good one." He looked at a pony, peacefully nursing. "Your daughter deserves that chance." The baby finished feeding, and Nita adjusted her dress before gently patting a pony's back. "Tomorrow, what will happen?" Jacob sighed. "Nothing good. Town meetings in places like this usually end with someone getting hanged or run out on a rail." He studied his coffee. "Come morning, I'll hitch the wagon. There's a stage station 30 miles south. From there, you can reach California." "They will follow," Nita said. "Not if they're busy with other problems," Jacob replied, a plan forming. "I know these people. Their courage is directly proportional to their numbers and inversely proportional to any actual threat." A noise outside interrupted them. A bottle breaking against the side of the house, followed by drunken laughter. Jacob grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could make out 3 figures retreating toward town. "Are just some brave men expressing their opinions from a safe distance," he said dryly, but Nita wasn't listening. She'd gone rigid in the chair, her eyes wide and focused on something Jacob couldn't see. "What is it?" he asked. "Death," she whispered. "It follows me." Jacob wanted to dismiss her words as exhaustion and fear, but something in her expression gave him pause. He'd seen that same certainty in Sarah's eyes once, right before a blizzard had killed half his cattle, despite clear skies when they'd set out. "Then we'll just have to be ready for it," he said, checking his rifle before adding more wood to the fire. It would be a long night. Chapter 3. The Town Meeting. The Coyote Springs Town Hall, a repurposed saloon that had burned halfway to the ground before being rebuilt, was packed to the rafters by noon. Jacob stood at the back, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with thinly veiled contempt. Nita and a pony remained at his ranch, with Buck standing guard and clear instructions to flee to a hidden ravine if trouble approached. Mayor Wilson, a former banker whose investment in the mines had made him the wealthiest man in town, called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. "Friends and citizens," he began pompously, "we gather today to address a matter of public safety and moral concern." Jacob snorted quietly. Public safety. As if a wounded woman and her infant posed a threat to anyone. Sheriff Dawson stood next, adjusting his badge importantly. "As you've all heard, an Apache woman has taken residence at the Harmon Ranch. What you may not know is that this woman is wanted for the murder of 2 prospectors in the hills 3 days ago." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," Dawson continued, "she carries with her a half-breed child, living proof of her immoral relations with a white man." The saloon owner, Henry Davis, stood up. "What business is it of ours who she lays with? Far as I can tell, her only crime is poor taste in men." This earned a few chuckles. "Her taste ain't the issue," countered Jeremiah Watts, the town's preacher. "It's the principle. God created the races separate for a reason. Mixing them defies his natural order." Jacob had heard enough. He pushed off the wall and made his way forward, the crowd parting reluctantly before him. Most knew him only by reputation, the quiet rancher who kept to himself, traded fairly, and could shoot the eye out of a hawk at 300 paces. "Seems to me," Jacob said, his voice cutting through the chatter, "that you're all mighty concerned about a woman and child who've done nothing to any of you." "She killed 2 men, Harmon," Dawson snapped. "You found bodies?" Jacob challenged. "Witnesses, or just convenient tracks that could belong to anyone?" The sheriff's face reddened. "We don't need to explain our justice to you, Harmon." "No, you just need a scapegoat to keep the mining company happy," Jacob replied. "Can't have investors thinking Indians might defend themselves when threatened, can we?" Mayor Wilson cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Harmon, no one is suggesting anything untoward. We simply believe the woman and her child would be better off elsewhere." "Elsewhere meaning dead in a ditch?" Jacob asked mildly. "And now see here," Dawson began, but was interrupted by a new voice. "If I may speak." A well-dressed man stood up from the front row. Jacob recognized him as Edward Collins, representative of the Sierra Silver Mining Company. "The company has invested considerable capital in Coyote Springs," Collins said smoothly. "All we ask is that the town maintain certain standards of civilization that make it hospitable to further investment. And an Apache woman ruins that," Jacob challenged. Collins smiled thinly. "What concerns us is lawlessness. If this woman has indeed committed murder, she defended herself against men who tried to take advantage of a woman traveling alone." Jacob interrupted. "Any of you would have done the same." "You weren't there, Harmon," Dawson pointed out. "You can't know what happened." "Neither were you, Sheriff," Jacob countered. "But I know the kind of men who prey on vulnerable women in these hills. They're usually wearing badges or working for mining companies." A tense silence fell over the room. Mayor Wilson cleared his throat again. Perhaps we can reach a compromise, Mr. Harmon. If you were to escort the woman and child to, say, Fort Bridger, the town could provide supplies for the journey. In exchange for what? Jacob asked skeptically. In exchange for this matter being settled peacefully, Collins interjected. The company would even be willing to contribute $50 toward their new start. Jacob studied the faces around him, some hostile, some indifferent, a few genuinely concerned. He recognized the offer for what it was, a bribe to make a problem disappear. I'll consider it, he said finally. On one condition, you all leave her be until we depart. No midnight visits, no accidents, no heroic poses. She stays under my protection until we're ready to leave. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. Buck limped in, bleeding from his flank. Jacob's blood ran cold. He'd left the dog guarding Nita and a pony. Meeting's over, he growled, pushing past the crowd and breaking into a run once outside. Whatever compromise might have been reached was now meaningless. Someone had decided to take matters into their own hands. Behind him, the meeting erupted into chaos as people spilled into the street, some following Jacob, others hurrying to spread the news. Sheriff Dawson shouted for order, but his voice was lost in the commotion. Jacob ran faster than he had in years, Buck struggling to keep pace despite his injury. The ranch was a mile outside town, and for the first time in his life, Jacob wished it was closer to civilization. As he crested the final rise, he saw smoke rising from the direction of his cabin. "No," he whispered, pushing his aging body harder. "Not again." Chapter 4. Confrontation at Dusk. The cabin wasn't burning, but smoke billowed from Jacob's barn. A distraction, he realized too late. The front door of his home hung open, its simple lock shattered. Jacob approached cautiously, rifle ready, scanning for movement. The quietness unnerved him more than gunfire would have. Buck whined softly, limping toward the house despite his injuries. Inside, chaos greeted him. Furniture overturned, his few possessions scattered. The trunk containing his memories of Sarah and their daughter lay open, its contents strewn across the floor. Jacob felt a surge of rage at this desecration. But no Nita, no Apache. A soft noise from the root cellar caught his attention. Jacob moved silently to the trap door, lifting it with his rifle aimed into the darkness below. "Jacob!" Nita's voice trembled with fear. Relief flooded him. "It's me. Are you hurt?" "No. They did not find us." She emerged from the cellar, a pony clutched to her chest. The baby was awake but eerily silent, as if understanding the need for quiet. "Who came?" Jacob demanded, helping her up. "3 men. Not from town. Different clothes. They spoke of money, bounty hunters," Jacob realized. Not Dawson's doing, then. Likely hired by someone connected to the men Nita had killed, or perhaps by the Apache scouts still hunting her. "They will return," Nita said with certainty. Jacob nodded grimly. "We need to leave. Now, not for Fort Bridger or California." He looked out the window toward the mountains. "There's an old trapper's cabin in the high country. A friend of mine used it before the winter took him 5 years back. No one else knows it's there." As they gathered what few supplies remained undamaged, a noise outside froze them both. Horses approaching, several of them. "Too late," Jacob muttered, peering through a crack in the shutters. The sunset silhouetted at least 8 riders approaching from town. In the lead was Sheriff Dawson, with Collins, the mining representative, beside him. "Out the back," Jacob ordered. "Get to the creek bed and follow it up into the hills. I'll meet you at Simpson's Rock." Nita hesitated. "They will kill you." Jacob smiled grimly. "They can try. I'll buy you time." Their eyes met, and Jacob saw in hers the same determination he'd once seen in Sarah's, the fierce protection of a mother who would die for her child. "Go," he said more gently. "Please." Nita nodded once, touching his arm briefly before slipping out the back door with a pony. Jacob took a deep breath, checking his rifle and positioning himself by the front window. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one they'd remember. The riders stopped 30 yards from the house. Dawson dismounted, motioning for the others to spread out. "Harmon," he called, "we know you're in there. Send out the Apache woman and we can end this peacefully." Jacob remained silent, tracking the men through his rifle sight as they encircled his property. "The situation has changed," Dawson continued. "Those men she killed, they were scouts for the army, not random prospectors. There's an official bounty now, dead or alive." Jacob doubted this convenient development, but kept his focus. Collins was positioning himself behind the water trough, while two men crept toward the barn. "Last chance, Harmon!" Dawson shouted. "Don't throw away your life for some Indian whore and her half-breed brat." The racial slur ignited something in Jacob that had lain dormant for 15 years. Without conscious thought, he aimed and fired, the bullet kicking up dirt inches from Dawson's boot. "Next one goes through your knee, Sheriff," Jacob called. "I've got nothing against the rest of you boys, but anyone who steps foot on my property is trespassing. I defend what's mine." A tense silence followed, broken by Collins's voice. "Be reasonable, Harmon. The bounty's $500. We're willing to split it with you. Just tell us where she's hiding." Jacob's laugh was cold. "You think I give a damn about your blood money? This isn't about money. It's about a woman and child being hunted for the crime of existing." "It's about the law," Dawson insisted. "No," Jacob replied. "It's about fear. Fear of anything different. Fear that if you treat Indians like people, you might have to question everything else you believe." One of the men by the barn raised his rifle. Jacob spotted the movement and fired, the bullet splintering the wood beside the man's head. The would-be shooter ducked for cover. "I've got 30 more rounds and 15 years of solitude to make my aim perfect," Jacob warned. "How many of you want to die today?" The standoff stretched, the tension growing with each passing minute. Jacob kept his rifle steady, watching for any movement that might threaten Nita's escape route. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening across the yard. Finally, Collins stood. "This is absurd. She's obviously gone, Sheriff. Your men should search the hills." Dawson hesitated, clearly reluctant to back down. "What about Harmon?" "Leave him," Collins said dismissively. "He's just one man. We'll deal with him after we find the woman." As the men remounted and prepared to ride out, Jacob felt a mixture of relief and dread. They'd be searching in the wrong direction initially, but eventually they'd find Nita's trail. He needed to move quickly. As the posse disappeared over the ridge, Jacob gathered ammunition, food, and medical supplies. He saddled his mare, an aging but reliable animal that knew the mountain trails better than most men. Just as he prepared to leave, he spotted movement in the gathering darkness, a lone rider approaching cautiously. Jacob raised his rifle, then lowered it in surprise as he recognized Henry Davis, the saloon owner. "You're a damn fool, Harmon," Davis said without preamble as he dismounted. "They're going to kill you." "Probably," Jacob agreed. "What brings you here?" Davis handed him a small sack that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. "Took up a collection among those of us who still remember what decency means. It ain't much, but it might help the woman and child start fresh somewhere." Jacob was momentarily speechless. "Why?" Davis shrugged uncomfortably. "My grandmother was Cherokee, never told a soul in this town. Some secrets you keep to survive." He glanced in the direction the posse had gone. "They're heading east. You'd be wise to go west." "Thank you," Jacob said simply, tucking the money into his saddlebag. Davis nodded once. "Never saw you? Never spoke to you? Good luck, Harmon." As Davis rode away, Jacob looked back at the cabin that had been his home for 15 lonely years. The ghosts of his past seemed to watch from the doorway. Sarah and their daughter, their faces faded by time, but their memory still sharp. "I couldn't save you," he whispered, "but maybe I can save them." Mounting his horse, Jacob turned toward the mountains and the uncertain future that awaited there. Chapter 5. Redemption at Dawn. Simpson's Rock loomed against the star-filled sky, a jagged formation that resembled a man's profile from certain angles. Jacob approached cautiously, alert for any sign of pursuit or danger. "Nita!" he called softly. A shadow detached itself from the rock face. Nita, with a pony secured to her chest in a makeshift sling. Relief washed over her face at the sight of him. "You live," she said simply. "Seems that way," Jacob replied, dismounting stiffly. The confrontation and hard ride had awakened old pains in his joints. "We need to keep moving. They're searching east, but that won't fool them for long." As they traveled higher into the mountains, following game trails rarely used by men, Jacob explained about Davis and the unexpected gift from the townspeople. "Not everyone agrees with Dawson and Collins," he concluded, "but fear makes cowards of decent folks." "And courage?" Nita asked. "What does it make of a lonely man?" Jacob had no answer for that. They reached the trapper's cabin near dawn, a crude but solid structure nestled in a sheltered valley beside a clear stream. Game was plentiful here, the water pure, and the location virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. While Nita fed and changed a pony, Jacob secured the perimeter, setting simple alarms that would warn of any approach. The cabin needed work. The roof leaked in one corner, and mice had claimed a drawer as their home, but it was defensible and hidden. "We can stay here until the first snow," Jacob explained, lighting a small fire in the stone hearth. "By then, they'll have given up the search. From here, we can head to California or Oregon. With Davis's money, you could start fresh." Nita studied him. "We?" Jacob busied himself with the fire. "Figure of speech. You'll be safer without an old man slowing you down." "You would return, after helping us." "Got nowhere else to go," Jacob admitted. "And someone needs to keep an eye on decent folks like Davis." Nita placed a pony in a makeshift cradle, fashioned from a drawer, then moved to sit beside Jacob. "My husband died protecting us," she said quietly. "You risk the same. Why?" Jacob stared into the flames, seeing the faces of his wife and daughter. "Because 15 years ago, I wasn't there when my family needed me. I've been dying slowly ever since." He met her gaze. "Maybe helping you is how I finally lay them to rest." Understanding passed between them. Not romance, but the recognition of shared loss and purpose. The moment was shattered by Buck's warning growl. Jacob was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Stay with a pony," he whispered, moving to the window. In the grey light of dawn, he could make out 5 riders approaching the valley, Dawson, Collins, and 3 others. They moved with the confidence of men who believed their quarry cornered. "How?" Nita whispered, joining him at the window. "Tracker," Jacob guessed, pointing to one of the men who rode slightly ahead, studying the ground. "Dawson must have brought him in from the fort. A good one, too, to have followed us through the rocks." "What now?" Nita asked, fear and determination warring in her voice. Jacob considered their options. The cabin was sturdy, but not impervious to determined men with guns. They could flee deeper into the mountains, but with a baby and limited supplies, they wouldn't last long. "We make a stand," he decided. "Here, together." As Dawson and his men approached the clearing before the cabin, Jacob stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Behind him, Nita stood in the doorway, a pony in her arms. "Morning, Sheriff," Jacob called. "You're a long way from town." Dawson reined in his horse, surprise flashing across his face before being replaced by grim satisfaction. "Harmon, should have known you'd head for high ground. These mountains are unclaimed territory," Jacob pointed out. "No law here but nature's." Collins urged his horse forward. "This has gone far enough, Harmon. The woman is wanted for murder. The child should be placed with a proper Christian family." "The woman defended herself against men who would have violated her," Jacob replied evenly, "and the child belongs with her mother." The tracker, a weathered man with Ute features, studied Nita with professional interest. "Apache woman ran far," he observed. "Must have strong reason." Strong enough to kill 4, Dawson said smugly. That's all we need to know. Jacob adjusted his stance slightly, keeping all 5 men in view. What happens now, Sheriff? You planning to shoot an unarmed woman holding a baby? Add child killer to your list of accomplishments? Uncertainty flickered across Dawson's face. Collins, however, showed no such hesitation. If she resists arrest, whatever happens is on her head. The mining representative said coldly. And what about the men of Coyote Springs? Jacob challenged. What will they think when you return with a dead woman and infant? You think Davis and the others will just accept that? Davis? Dawson frowned. What does he have to do with this? Jacob smiled thinly. Where do you think I got the information about your plans? Not everyone in town shares your views, Sheriff. Some folks remember what decency means. This was a bluff, but Jacob could see it landing. Dawson glanced at his companions uncertainly. Enough talk, Collins snapped. Sheriff, do your duty or I'll do it for you. He reached for his pistol, but before he could draw, the tracker suddenly raised his hand. Wait, the Ute man said, his gaze fixed on a pony. The child? What about it? Collins demanded impatiently. The tracker dismounted, approaching cautiously until he stood at the foot of the porch steps. His eyes never left the baby. May I see? He asked Nita in heavily accented English. After a moment's hesitation, Nita adjusted the blanket to reveal a pony's face more clearly. The tracker studied the child, then looked at Nita. The father of this child, he wore a silver cross, had burn on left hand. Nita's eyes widened. Yes, from childhood. How do you know this? The tracker turned to Dawson. This woman speaks truth. The men who died, they were deserters, not scouts. One was my sister's husband who abandoned her last winter. I tracked him to warn others of his crimes. That's absurd, Collins spluttered. This savage is clearly lying to protect one of his own kind. The tracker's expression hardened. I do not lie, white man. The dead men were thieves who stole from both whites and Indians. If this woman killed them, she did the territory a service. Dawson looked thoroughly confused now. But the bounty was placed by me, using army papers these men had stolen, the tracker admitted. I sought justice my own way when your law failed my sister. Jacob watched this unexpected turn of events with cautious hope. The tracker's revelation had changed the dynamics completely. Collins, however, was not so easily deterred. This changes nothing, he insisted. The woman is still an Apache living outside the reservation. The child is still a half-breed that belongs in proper society. And who decides what's proper? Jacob challenged. You, the mining company? The law, Collins snapped. Then let's make it legal, Jacob suggested. Nita, will you accept my protection as my wife under frontier custom, until such time as we can reach a proper official? Nita's gaze met his, surprised, questioning, understanding. After a moment, she nodded. I accept. Jacob turned back to the stunned men. There you have it, gentlemen. Nita is now under my protection as my wife-to-be. A pony is my stepdaughter. Any man who threatens them threatens me, and I still have plenty of bullets. The tracker smiled slightly, nodding in approval. Dawson looked between Collins and Jacob, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. Collins, I think we're done here. The woman's claimed under marriage rights. The bounty was falsely placed. And frankly, I'm not dying on this mountain for your mining company. This is outrageous, Collins protested. You can't possibly accept this. This mockery of civilization. Watch me, Dawson replied, turning his horse. Harmon, I don't like you and I don't like Indians, but I like being used by mining companies even less. Far as I'm concerned, this matter's closed. As Dawson and his men prepared to depart, the tracker approached Jacob one last time. The child has 2 bloods, he said quietly. 2 spirits. This is powerful medicine if raised with wisdom. He looked at Nita. The father of your child, was he kind? The kindest man I ever knew, Nita replied softly. The tracker nodded. Then his spirit watches over her still. He touched his chest. As does yours, Harmon. I see old grief healing in your eyes today. With that cryptic observation, he mounted his horse and followed the others down the mountain trail, leaving Jacob and Nita standing on the porch in the golden light of dawn. "Did you mean it?" Nita asked when the riders had disappeared from view. "About marriage?" Jacob looked at her honestly. "I meant what I said about protection. The rest, that's for you to decide, in your own time. I'm an old man with old scars, Nita, but I promise you this, as long as I live, no harm will come to you or a pony." Nita smiled, the first true smile he'd seen from her. "We are both scarred, Jacob Harmon. Perhaps that is why we understand each other." A pony stirred in her arms, making soft cooing sounds as the sun crested the mountain, bathing the valley in light. "What happens now?" Nita asked, gazing out at the wilderness around them. Jacob considered the question, feeling something long dormant stirring in his chest, hope. "Now," he said, "we build a new beginning. Together." As they stood in the doorway of the small cabin, with the mountains rising around them and the future stretching before them, Jacob felt the weight of 15 years of solitude lifting from his shoulders. He had failed to save his first family, but perhaps, in saving Nita and a pony, he had found a way to save himself as well. In the distance, an eagle soared against the blue sky, free, wild, and unafraid.